Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom were not your average group of friends. They shared a unique interest that set them apart from their peers, a fascination with the paranormal. At ages 13 and 14, they spent countless hours watching ghost hunting shows, reading spooky stories, and discussing the existence of spirits. This fascination led them to form their own amateur ghost hunting club, and they eagerly looked forward to their weekend adventures. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the friends gathered in Jack's dimly lit garage. The air buzzed with excitement and a hint of fear, for they had decided to investigate an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. Known as the Mortimer House, it had a dark reputation. Stories of eerie happenings, ghostly apparitions, and mysterious disappearances surrounded the place. Local legend had it that the house was cursed after a tragic event that occurred many years ago. Jack, the unofficial leader of the group, spread out a map of the town on an old wooden table. "All right, team," he said, his voice steady but eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Tonight we investigate the Mortimer House. Are we ready?" Emily, always the brave one, nodded eagerly. Her long brown hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her green eyes shone with excitement. "I've packed all our gear, flashlights, cameras, and the EVP recorder," she said, listing the items with a sense of pride. Sarah, quieter and more skeptical but just as curious, adjusted her glasses and asked, "Do you really think we'll find anything?" Tom, the youngest and most imaginative, grinned widely. "I hope so. Imagine catching real ghost footage. We'll be famous." With their equipment packed and nerves steeled, the friends set off towards the Mortimer House. The journey was filled with a mix of nervous chatter and silence as they approached the foreboding structure. Tall and looming, the house stood at the end of a lonely, tree-lined street. Its windows were dark and empty, and the air around it seemed colder, sending shivers down their spines. As they stood before the wrought iron gates, Jack took a deep breath. "This is it," he said softly. "Let's see what secrets the Mortimer House holds." And with that, they stepped into the unknown, ready to uncover the mysteries of the haunted house. The Mortimer House was a relic from another time. Built in the late 1800s, it once stood as a grand symbol of wealth and prosperity. Now, it was a shadow of its former self, a dilapidated structure cloaked in mystery and fear. The friends stood at the rusty iron gates, staring at the eerie silhouette against the darkening sky. The house was a large, two-story building with a steep, gabled roof. Its once white paint had faded and peeled, revealing the weathered wood beneath. The windows, many of them broken or boarded up, seemed like dark eyes watching their every move. Ivy crawled up the walls, and the garden, once manicured, was now overgrown with weeds and tangled bushes. An ancient oak tree loomed nearby, its gnarled branches creaking in the wind. Jack pushed open the creaky gate, and it swung inward with a loud groan. The friends hesitated for a moment before stepping onto the overgrown path that led to the front door. The crunch of leaves and twigs underfoot was the only sound as they approached the house, each step filling them with a mix of dread and excitement. As they reached the front porch, they noticed a heavy wooden door, its surface marred by age and neglect. A tarnished brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head hung in the center, adding to the house's intimidating aura. Jack reached out and, with a deep breath, pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing through the empty halls. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of mildew. The foyer was dark, illuminated only by the weak beams of their flashlights. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. Broken furniture and old, tattered curtains hinted at the house's former grandeur. They ventured further inside, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The living room was filled with antique furniture, all covered in white sheets that looked like ghostly figures in the dim light. A grand fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel cluttered with dusty photographs and trinkets. Emily shivered as she shone her flashlight over the photographs, each one capturing a moment frozen in time, now obscured by years of neglect. The friends moved cautiously, exploring room after room. The dining room held a long table with a chandelier hanging precariously above it, cobwebs draping from its crystal arms. The kitchen was a scene of decay, with rusted appliances and cracked tiles. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper of its tragic past. As they reached the staircase, Jack turned to his friends. "This place is incredible," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "But it's also really creepy. Let's stick together, okay?" They nodded in agreement and began their ascent, the stairs creaking ominously under their weight. Each step seemed to echo through the house, as if announcing their presence to unseen inhabitants. The second floor was even darker, with long, narrow hallways that stretched into the shadows. At the end of one hallway, they found a room with a large, ornate door. It was slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. They exchanged nervous glances before pushing it open, revealing a dusty bedroom. The bed was neatly made, as if waiting for someone to return, and an old rocking chair sat by the window, facing the garden outside. Suddenly, a chill filled the room, and they felt an eerie presence. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "It's like someone is watching us." Tom, trying to be brave, said, "Let's set up our equipment here. This might be where we find something." With hearts pounding, they began setting up their cameras and EVP recorder, ready to document whatever paranormal activity awaited them in the Mortimer house. The friends worked quickly, setting up their equipment in the dim light of the bedroom. Jack placed a camera on a tripod, ensuring it had a clear view of the room. Emily set the EVP recorder on the nightstand next to the bed, its red light blinking softly. Tom and Sarah positioned additional flashlights around the room to provide better lighting, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "All right, everything's set," Jack said, his voice steady despite the nervous excitement in his eyes. "Let's start by asking some questions and see if we get any responses." They gathered around the EVP recorder, their flashlights illuminating their anxious faces. Jack cleared his throat and spoke clearly into the device. "If there's anyone here with us, can you give us a sign?" For a moment, there was only silence. The friends held their breath, straining to hear any response. Suddenly, a soft, barely audible whisper filled the room. Emily's eyes widened, and she pointed to the recorder. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Jack nodded, pressing the playback button on the recorder. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. "Leave," it said, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah clutched her flashlight tighter, her knuckles white. "This is really happening," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to be careful." Tom, trying to keep his composure, suggested, "Maybe we should ask more questions. See if we can learn anything about the spirit." Jack agreed and leaned closer to the recorder. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are you here?" The room seemed to grow colder, and they could see their breath in the air. The EVP recorder crackled, and another whisper emerged. "Help. Trapped. Revenge." The friends exchanged nervous glances. The spirit seemed to be in distress, seeking their help. Emily, always the brave one, decided to push further. "How can we help you?" she asked gently. The response was immediate, a chilling whisper that filled the room. "Find the diary. The truth. Free me." Jack frowned, looking around the room. "A diary. There must be something hidden here that can tell us more." They began searching the room, opening drawers and looking under the bed. Tom found an old, dusty book hidden behind a loose floorboard. He pulled it out, revealing a worn leather cover with the word "diary" embossed on it. "Found it," Tom exclaimed, holding up the book. They gathered around him as he carefully opened the diary, its pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was old-fashioned and difficult to read, but they could make out the name at the top of the first page, Annabelle Mortimer. As they read through the diary, they uncovered the tragic story of the Mortimer family. Annabelle was the youngest daughter, and the diary detailed her life in the house. It spoke of a loving family, but as they read further, the entries grew darker. Annabelle wrote about strange occurrences, shadows in the hallways, and a growing sense of dread. The final entries were the most chilling. Annabelle described a night when she heard whispers in her room, urging her to leave. She felt an evil presence, something dark and malevolent. The last entry was frantic, describing how her family tried to perform a ritual to cleanse the house, but something went horribly wrong. Annabelle's final words were a plea for help, stating that her spirit was trapped, seeking revenge for the suffering they endured. The friends sat in stunned silence, the weight of Annabelle's story heavy in the air. "We need to find out more about this ritual," Jack said finally. "Maybe we can finish what they started and help Annabelle find peace." Emily nodded, determined. "We can't let her spirit suffer any longer. We need to do this." As they prepared to continue their investigation, the room grew even colder, and a low, menacing growl echoed through the house. They froze, fear gripping their hearts. The growl grew louder, and the air seemed to vibrate with a dark energy. "Something doesn't want us here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to be careful." Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself. "We're not backing down. We have to help Annabelle." With renewed determination, they gathered their equipment and prepared to face whatever dark force was haunting the Mortimer house. The night was far from over, and they knew the worst was yet to come. As the clock struck midnight, the air in the Mortimer house grew thicker, as if the darkness itself was pressing down on them. Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom huddled together, their flashlights cutting through the heavy gloom. The growl they heard earlier still echoed in their minds, but their resolve was stronger than their fear. "Let's head to the basement," Jack suggested, his voice steady. "If there's any place where dark rituals were performed, it's likely down there." They carefully made their way down the creaking staircase to the first floor, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As they reached the kitchen, Jack found the door to the basement. It was old and worn, with deep scratches on its surface, as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way out. He hesitated for a moment before pulling the door open, revealing a steep, narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was cold and damp, carrying a faint, musty odor. "Stay close," he whispered, leading the way down. The basement was a labyrinth of shadows. Their flashlights barely pierced the darkness, revealing cobwebs draping from the ceiling and old, broken furniture scattered about. In the far corner, they found an old wooden table covered in dusty, yellowed papers and strange symbols etched into the surface. Emily examined the symbols closely, recognizing some from the diary's description of the ritual. "These match the ones Annabelle described," she said. "This must be where they tried to cleanse the house." Tom shivered, his eyes darting around nervously. "I don't like this place. It feels wrong." As they continued exploring, they heard faint footsteps above them, as if someone, or something, was walking through the house. The sound grew louder, echoing down the staircase, and then stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was oppressive, weighing heavily on their senses. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the basement, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as they fumbled to turn them back on. In the pitch black, they heard a soft, whispering voice echoing all around them. "Leave. Now." Emily managed to switch her flashlight back on, casting a beam of light across the room. In the dim light, they saw a shadowy figure standing at the bottom of the stairs. It was a tall, dark silhouette with glowing red eyes, staring directly at them. "Run!" Jack shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her towards the stairs. Sarah and Tom followed close behind, their hearts pounding as they scrambled up the steps. They burst into the kitchen, slamming the basement door shut behind them. Breathing heavily, they leaned against the door, trying to calm their racing hearts. "What was that?" Sarah gasped, her face pale. "I don't know," Jack replied, "but it's clear that something doesn't want us here." Emily looked at the others, determination in her eyes. "We can't give up now." Annabelle needs our help. We have to find out more about the ritual and complete it." Tom nodded, his fear replaced by a sense of purpose. "You're right. We need to finish what they started." They decided to search the rest of the house for more clues. As they moved through the dark hallways, they felt the temperature drop even further. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, making their nerves fray with each passing minute. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, they found an old chest hidden under the bed. Inside, it contained more papers and a small, leather-bound book. Emily carefully opened the book, revealing detailed instructions for the cleansing ritual. It described the necessary components: candles, salt, and a personal item from the spirit they were trying to help. "This is it," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to gather these items and perform the ritual in the basement." The friends split up, searching the house for the components. Jack found an old box of candles in a dusty cupboard, while Sarah located a bag of salt in the kitchen pantry. Tom discovered a locket in one of the bedrooms, a small photograph of Annabelle inside. With everything they needed, they returned to the basement. The air felt even colder, and an oppressive silence hung over the room. They set up the candles in a circle, sprinkled the salt around the perimeter, and placed Annabelle's locket in the center. Jack lit the candles, their flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emily opened the leather-bound book and began reading the incantation aloud. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. As she spoke the final words, a sudden gust of wind blew through the basement, extinguishing the candles. The room plunged into darkness, and they heard a low, menacing growl. The shadowy figure reappeared, its red eyes glowing with fury. "Stay together," Jack shouted, grabbing his friend's hands. The figure advanced, but as it reached the circle of salt, it stopped abruptly, as if an invisible barrier held it back. The air grew colder, and they could see their breath in the dim light. The figure snarled, its red eyes blazing with anger. Emily continued the incantation, her voice unwavering. The shadowy figure writhed in pain, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. With one final, agonized scream, it dissolved into the darkness, and the room fell silent. The oppressive cold lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the basement. They felt a warm presence, and for a moment, they saw a faint, ghostly figure of a young girl smiling at them before fading away. "It's over," Jack said, his voice filled with relief. "We did it." They gathered their equipment and made their way out of the basement, feeling a sense of accomplishment and a newfound respect for the paranormal. As they stepped out of the Mortimer house, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the darkness, signaling the end of their harrowing night. They knew they had made a difference, helping a lost spirit find peace. The experience had brought them closer together, and they felt a deep sense of pride in their success. But they also knew that this was just the beginning of their adventures in the world of the supernatural. As the first light of dawn illuminated the Mortimer house, Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom emerged, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They had survived a night filled with terror, but they knew their journey was far from over. The diary and the ritual they had performed had only scratched the surface of the house's dark history. They gathered in Jack's garage later that morning, their faces pale and drawn. Emily laid out the diary and the leather-bound ritual book on the table. "We need to understand more about what happened here," she said, her voice steady despite her fatigue. "Annabelle's spirit may have found peace, but there are still many unanswered questions." Jack nodded, flipping through the pages of the diary. Annabelle mentioned other spirits and a vengeful presence. "We need to know what we're dealing with if we're going to put an end to this haunting." Sarah, always the researcher, had brought her laptop. "I'll look up any historical records or news articles about the Mortimer family and the house. There might be something we've missed." Tom, still shaken but determined, added, "I'll check out any local legends or stories that could give us more clues." Hours passed as they delved into their research. Sarah uncovered old newspaper articles about the Mortimer family. The house had indeed been a site of multiple tragedies. Annabelle's death was just one of many. Her older brother, Charles, had mysteriously disappeared, and their father, Jonathan Mortimer, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. The mother, Eleanor Mortimer, was said to have gone mad with grief, eventually disappearing without a trace. "Listen to this," Sarah said, reading from an article dated 1895. Jonathan Mortimer was found dead in the basement, clutching a strange amulet. The amulet was believed to be cursed, tied to an ancient ritual meant to summon and control spirits. It seems like he was trying to use it to communicate with his lost children. Emily's eyes widened. "That must be what we felt in the basement. The amulet's power could be the source of the malevolent spirit." Tom looked up from his own research. "I found a local legend about a curse placed on the Mortimer family. It says that Jonathan Mortimer made a deal with a dark entity to protect his family from harm. But when the deal went wrong, the entity turned on them, cursing the house and trapping their spirits." Jack leaned back, deep in thought. "So, the amulet is the key. If we can find it and destroy it, we might be able to break the curse and free the spirits trapped in the house." The friends decided to return to the Mortimer house that night, armed with their new knowledge. They packed their gear, determined to find the amulet and put an end to the haunting once and for all. As dusk settled, they approached the house with a sense of grim determination. The shadows seemed to reach out to them, and the air was thick with anticipation. They entered cautiously, their flashlights casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. "We need to find the basement again," Jack said, leading the way. "That's where Jonathan was found, and it's likely where the amulet is hidden." They made their way to the basement door, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. The staircase creaked under their weight as they descended into the dark, musty depths. The air grew colder with each step, and the oppressive feeling of being watched returned. At the bottom of the stairs, they spread out, searching for any sign of the amulet. Emily found a loose brick in the wall and, with some effort, pried it free. Behind it was a small, hidden compartment. She reached in and pulled out a small, ornate box, covered in dust and cobwebs. "I think this is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She opened the box, revealing a dark, intricately carved amulet. It pulsed with an ominous energy, sending a shiver down their spines. Jack took a deep breath. "We need to destroy it. But how?" Sarah looked through the ritual book they had found. "There's a passage here about breaking curses. It requires a combination of salt, fire, and a cleansing incantation. We have everything we need." They set up the ritual in the basement, forming a circle of salt around the amulet. Jack lit a small fire in the center, and Emily began reciting the cleansing incantation from the book. As she spoke the ancient words, the amulet seemed to resist, glowing brighter and pulsing with dark energy. The room grew colder, and the air vibrated with a menacing presence. The shadowy figure with red eyes reappeared, snarling and clawing at the edge of the salt circle, unable to break through. Emily's voice wavered, but she continued the incantation, pouring all her strength into the words. Suddenly, the amulet began to crack, emitting a high-pitched scream. The shadowy figure roared in fury, thrashing against the invisible barrier. With a final burst of energy, the amulet shattered into pieces, and the dark presence was sucked into the ground, leaving behind an eerie silence. The temperature in the basement rose, and the oppressive feeling lifted. They felt a warm, comforting presence, as if the spirits trapped in the house were finally free. The friends stood in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. "It's over," Jack said softly, a sense of relief washing over him. "We did it. We broke the curse." They gathered their equipment and made their way out of the basement, feeling a sense of accomplishment and peace. As they stepped outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, signaling a new beginning. In the days that followed, the Mortimer house stood silent and empty. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. The friends knew they had made a difference, helping to free the spirits trapped by a dark curse. Their experience at the Mortimer house had brought them closer together, strengthening their bond and deepening their fascination with the paranormal. They knew this was just the beginning of their adventures, and they were ready to face whatever mysteries and challenges awaited them. As the friends stepped out of the basement, the oppressive darkness seemed to lift, but an uneasy feeling lingered. They had shattered the cursed amulet, but the malevolent spirit was not gone yet. They could feel it, a seething presence still lurking within the walls of the Mortimer house. "We need to finish this," Jack said, his voice resolute. "The amulet's destruction weakened it, but we have to face the spirit directly to banish it for good." Emily nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Let's head to the living room. It's the heart of the house, and I think that's where we'll find it." The living room, once a place of grandeur, was now a shadow of its former self. Dust-covered furniture and broken chandeliers told stories of long-lost opulence. The friends gathered in the center of the room, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the faded wallpaper. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the ritual book to the final incantation. "We need to draw a protection circle around us and light the candles again. This incantation will force the spirit to reveal itself, and then we can banish it." They quickly set to work, drawing a large circle with salt and placing candles at each point. The flickering flames created a circle of light in the darkened room, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. Emily began the incantation, her voice steady and strong. As she spoke the ancient words, the temperature in the room plummeted, and an icy wind whipped around them. Shadows seemed to gather at the edges of the circle, coalescing into a dark, swirling mass. The malevolent spirit appeared, a towering figure of darkness with glowing red eyes. It snarled and thrashed against the invisible barrier, its fury palpable. The friends stood their ground, their fear replaced by a fierce determination to end this haunting. "Keep going, Emily," Jack urged, his eyes locked on the spirit. Emily's voice grew louder, the power of the incantation building with each word. The spirit roared in agony, its form flickering, distorting as it fought against the binding power of the circle. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath them trembled. With a final, desperate scream, the spirit lunged at the circle, only to be repelled by a blinding flash of light. The candles flared brightly, their flames merging into a searing beam that struck the spirit, tearing it apart. The room was filled with a deafening roar, and then, just as suddenly, it was over. The silence that followed was almost deafening. The dark presence was gone, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The friends stood in the circle, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, but their faces lit with relief and triumph. "We did it," Sarah whispered, tears of relief in her eyes. "It's finally over." Tom let out a whoop of joy, punching the air. "We really did it. We banished the spirit." Jack hugged Emily, his voice filled with gratitude. "You were amazing, Emily. We couldn't have done it without you." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it together. We faced our fears and freed the spirits trapped here." They carefully cleaned up their equipment, extinguished the candles, and gathered their belongings. As they stepped out of the Mortimer house, the first light of dawn was breaking through the darkness, heralding a new day. The friends walked away from the house, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. They knew this was just the beginning of their adventures in the world of the supernatural, and they were ready for whatever mysteries awaited them next. As the sun rose higher in the sky, painting the world in soft hues of pink and gold, the friends left the Mortimer house behind. The sense of triumph and relief was palpable, but so was the exhaustion from their harrowing night. They walked in silence, each lost in their thoughts, replaying the events that had just transpired. Back at Jack's house, they gathered in the garage, their usual meeting spot. It felt surreal to be back in a place that was so familiar after the intense experiences they had shared. Emily set down the ritual book and diary on the table, looking at her friends with a weary but satisfied smile. "We did it," she said, breaking the silence. "We actually did it." Jack nodded, his face showing a mix of pride and exhaustion. "We freed Annabelle and the other spirits. They can rest in peace now." Sarah, always the thoughtful one, spoke up. I think we also learned a lot about ourselves. We faced our fears and stood up to something truly terrifying. It wasn't easy, but we did it together. Tom, still buzzing with the adrenaline of their adventure, grinned widely. And we have proof. The recordings, the pictures, everything. This is going to make an amazing story for our blog. They all laughed, the tension of the night finally giving way to relief and camaraderie. They spent the next few hours going through their footage and recordings, finding undeniable evidence of their paranormal encounters. The EVP recordings captured the whispers and growls, while the photos showed the shadowy figure and strange orbs of light. As they reviewed the evidence, they also took time to reflect on what they had achieved. They had not only documented a real haunting, but had also brought peace to a tormented spirit. The experience had changed them, making them more confident and determined to continue their paranormal investigations. Jack looked at his friends, his eyes filled with gratitude. I couldn't have asked for a better team. We faced something truly terrifying, and we came out stronger. I'm proud of all of us. Emily nodded, her smile warm. This is just the beginning. There are so many other places with stories to uncover and spirits that might need our help. Sarah agreed. And now we know we can handle it. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Tom, always the dreamer, looked excitedly towards the future. Imagine all the other haunted places we could explore. This is going to be amazing. As they made plans for their next adventure, a sense of excitement and purpose filled the air. They knew that their journey into the world of the supernatural was just beginning, and they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The Mortimer House had been a test of their courage and resolve, and they had passed with flying colors. Their friendship was stronger, their skills sharper, and their determination unwavering. Together, they would continue to seek out the mysteries of the unknown, driven by the thrill of discovery and the desire to help those trapped between worlds. And so, as the first day of their new chapter dawned, the friends looked forward to the future with a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows of the past had been dispelled, and the light of their collective courage and determination shone brightly, guiding them on their next paranormal adventure. Weeks had passed since their encounter at the Mortimer House, but the memories remained vivid in their minds. Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom found themselves more connected than ever, their shared experience forging an unbreakable bond. Their story of the Mortimer House investigation spread quickly. The blog they had started, initially followed by a few curious friends, now had hundreds of readers eagerly awaiting their next adventure. The photos, EVP recordings, and detailed accounts of their night in the haunted house captivated their audience, turning the friends into local legends. One Saturday afternoon, the group gathered in Jack's garage, brainstorming their next investigation. The walls were now adorned with maps, articles, and photographs from various haunted locations they had researched. I've been looking into the old asylum on the edge of town, Sarah said, pointing to a spot on the map. It's been abandoned for decades, and there are stories of ghostly apparitions and strange noises. Tom's eyes lit up with excitement. An asylum. That sounds terrifying. I'm in. Emily nodded thoughtfully. We've faced a lot already, but we need to be even more prepared this time. The asylum is much larger and has a darker history. Jack smiled, feeling a surge of pride and anticipation. We'll tackle it just like we did with the Mortimer House. Together, we can handle anything. As they finalized their plans, a sense of excitement and determination filled the room. They knew the risks, but their passion for uncovering the unknown and helping trapped spirits drove them forward. The Mortimer House had been their first true test, and they had emerged stronger and more united. With their gear packed and their resolve steeled, they were ready for their next adventure. The shadows of the past were behind them, and a new journey awaited. And so, with the sun setting on one chapter and rising on another, Jack, Emily, Sarah, and Tom set their sights on the old asylum, ready to face whatever ghosts and mysteries lay within.